Okay, so we are back with season 6, episode 4 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And this episode starts off where we left off from on episode 3. We see Whitney leaving out, and Angie and Lisa are still going back and forth at the table. Lisa takes some digs at Angie's salons, and Angie calls her out about being a liar and how she lies to deflect from what's going on with her. They continue to go back and forth, and Angie, lets her know, like, I helped you out promoting your son's line and didn't even go with my brand. And you're over here trying to chase, my sponsors and the people I'm in business with, but you need to be working on your son's brand. And they keep going back and forth. And, Lisa goes low, Angie goes lower and tells her, your son's line belongs in Walmart, which, she was shocked. And of course, here comes Meredith. She had to pipe in and say something and jump in to defend Lisa instead of holding her accountable. And then we have Heather. She also jumped in and, she somewhat held Lisa accountable, but she was really on Angie. But then she goes back over to Lisa. And what I've been waiting for Heather to do um, with this whole franchise is really hold Lisa accountable. And I feel like she did it here. She let her know, like, you don't have to go low with her. You don't have to talk to Angie like that. You don't talk to any of us like that. And then let Angie know the same thing too. You don't have to go lower because she's going low. You know, it's just it was a lot going on. I was surprised by Heather, and I'm glad that she did that. Lisa, she is a loss for words for the first time ever. But Mary, and Heather, they call Lisa out and they let her know, like, you don't show your vulnerability. And we know that you're vulnerable. And she says, she grew up different than everybody else. And I was hoping he didn't go back into that elitist mindset that she's been showing, but she just left it at that and basically said in so many words that she's been hurt by the girls and hurt by Angie. And she apologizes to Angie. Angie apologizes back to her. Um, and they both say that they're sorry. And it sounds like they're going to try to move on from there. uh Lisa, she's squeezing out a few tears. So it does feel like it's genuine versus some other times where we've seen her attempt to cry, but nothing's coming out. So I do believe that she has a better understanding of how she's making everybody feel. And what I've said before about Lisa, Lisa is a hurt person, and that's why she's hurting other people because she's really hurt deeply inside. And I think that if she does allow people in, that she'll be able to get some healing and find some support in these ladies. As they're continue to talk, Lisa gives a half-ass acknowledgement to Bronwyn about how she's treated her. She doesn't apologize, but she somewhat acknowledges how she's treated her. Bronwyn takes it home and she's like, you know what? When you're ready to acknowledge that you've hurt me and that I've hurt you and we've hurt each other, then we can really move on, from there. And Bronwyn is always being the bigger person when it comes to her and Lisa, and I appreciate that. But Lisa, you need to grow up and acknowledge that you have an issue with her, and you guys need to resolve it in order for this friend group to, work out. The next scene opens up with Meredith, her husband Seth, and their daughter Chloe at their store, and they're talking about improvements that they want to make at that time and just different ideas and stuff. And of course, Seth, he's such a jokester. He has Chloe get on his shoulders and they're just fooling around. It's super cute. And the next scene, we see Heather and Mary. They meet up, to have a drink and talk shop and stuff. It is really funny because they're talking about this tequila that they're drinking. And here goes Mary talking about it tastes like hospital. And I was just like, Mary, girl, you in this hospital smell, taste. And Heather's like, so now you can taste like hospital, not just smell like it. And if you remember in a previous episode, she told Jen Shaw she smelled like a hospital. So after that, we see Whitney and her husband. They're putting together a stripper pole for her because, of course, she wants to get back to that. All the things she's been through, made her want to go back to stuff that makes her happy, and she's excited for it. So in this next scene, we see someone pull it up and they cannot drive. They're all up on the curb and everything. And to our surprise, it is Bronwyn. She hops out of her vehicle and it looks like she's meeting up with somebody. And it's Lisa. We're at Lisa's club slash restaurant. And I'm surprised. I'm like, oh Lord, what's gonna happen, with these two because it has not been good for them, at least last season. So we see that it was actually Lisa, who invited her, and her reasons being is that she wanted to be one on one and didn't want other people jumping in so they could actually hash it out. Which, you know what, I'll give it to Lisa. She, her apology did need to be like this to Bronwyn, and they did need to hash it out one on one. Um, so Alicia, she starts out by apologizing, and Bronwyn says, she's listening. She's listening. And Lisa feels like their issues stem from their friendship, but Bronwyn corrects her and says it's because of what Lisa did, and that she felt like what she did was on purpose. But she does also tell Lisa that she appreciates that she did try to bridge, the situation with her, the families when it comes to her daughter Gwen. Um, and Lisa also states that, she's triggered by her husband being brought up. And again, Brown corrects her, and she's not letting up on correcting the things that Lisa is saying and how she's trying to compare two things that are apples and oranges. Um, Lisa being triggered by her husband being brought up, it was a question. She didn't say anything negative about Lisa's husband, like what Lisa said about Bronwyn's husband. And so she explains to her it's not the same. It's not the same, the things that you're saying, and they kind of start going back and forth. But I applaud Bronwyn for cutting it off and just lets her know, hey, look, I don't want to rehash every single thing that happened between us. I want it to be neutral so that we can exist with each other and that the girls, can be friends with both of us and it's not hard. It doesn't make it hard. So they agree. Kids, husbands are off limits, and I really appreciate, her just cutting to the chase on it. We do see Braun in her confessional say like, explaining things about why she's the way that she is and how, she is with her family because she doesn't want to be like her mom, which again points back to the validation seeking that we've seen in previous episodes with her, even in the last episode. So her and Lisa hug it out, and it sounds like, they're on the road to recovery of their friendship. We'll just have to pay attention and see how it goes. But I hope that they are able to work it out. In this next scene, we have Mary and her cousin Big Joe pulling up to her grandmother's church to see the renovations that took place after it being closed for almost 2 years. As they're doing a walkthrough and going over all the different things, the improvements and stuff, uh, Big Joe asks Mary about her son, Robert Jr., and how he's doing. They both get a little emotional, and Big Joe sheds a few tears about the situation with Robert Jr. As they talk about him, the conversation turns towards the church and how Mary, came to church and how she was called by her grandmother. And they start talking about her strained relationship with her own mother and how her mom had tried to take over against what her grandmother's wishes were for the church, and how her mom sold stories and lies to the media about her. During this conversation, we find out that Mary's mom passed away a few months ago from the time of this recording. Mary gets emotional, and Joe is giving her a minute to collect herself. And of course, in Mary fashion, there's always some comedic relief there. So she's blowing her nose. She's like, I'm blowing my nose, but I'm sorry I have to use this, and I don't know what this is. I think it's a tissue. And we find out it's a Louis Vuitton mask. She's using it as a tissue. Mary, she's something else. Next, we see Angie at her salon, and it is busy. It's packed. There's a lot going on. And Heather pulls up, and we find out that Angie's cosmetology license has lapsed, so she has to retake a lot of the tests to get reinstated. So Heather has volunteered her head to be used so that Angie can take some of the tests again. So as they're sitting there doing a perm on Heather's head, Angie tells her that Lisa's assistant popped up to pick up her son's line from Angie, and she was surprised. And more surprising, Lisa Venmoed her for the products and left her a shady comment talking about, she could send cleaners over to her salon since it's so dusty. Of course, Angie, she gives it right back to her. And they go back and forth. And I'm sorry, but this is just a testament that Lisa cannot exist without some type of conflict with someone. Um, Her and Heather, discuss how they thought they were all cool until this situation happened with Lisa. And we're back to square one again with Lisa having conflict with somebody. Again, this lady cannot exist without having some type of conflict. In the next scene, we see Whitney and Brittany meeting up at a botanical plant shop. And Brittany apologizes to Whitney for the things that she said. In her confessional, we see that she had a realization that she did exactly to Whitney what Lisa was doing to her. So she wanted to apologize for that. And they hash out their issues very briefly. But as they're walking through the botanical shop, Brittany and Whitney talk about her relationship with Jared and how it's affecting her relationship with her daughter. And Whitney tries to give Brittany some advice on maybe, taking a break and doing what's best um, for her daughter and their relationship. And Brittany doesn't seem to get it. Even though Whitney's like laying it out as clear as possible, she still seems to be a little obtuse. I hope she gets it, but I don't have a lot of faith that Brittany will. So in this scene, we have Bronwyn and her mom at home going through what looks like some decorations, possibly. And as they're sitting there talking, Bronwyn and her boyfriend are letting them know they're leaving, and it looks like they're going on a date. And they're saying they're going bowling because they're part of bowling, but they see right through it. As they leave, Bronwyn and her mom are having a conversation, and you can tell her mom disapproves of the living situation. And I don't care too much for Bronwyn's mom because of how she treats her and belittles her, but I do agree with her on the topic of, that young man should not be living in their home. But I also think that ties into Bronwyn's validation seeking. She's also seeking validation from her child and acceptance from her child because she didn't get it from her parents. And as they're discussing their different parenting styles and, how she felt like that's not the best way. And Braun was telling her, I think that, it cuts down on the child being sneaky if I provide them an environment where they can be open. And in some cases, that is true, but I think Braun has overdone it in this case with letting the boyfriend live there. As they continue to talk, her mom is kind of shaming her. And it's just the more this lady talks, the more I dislike her. Bronwyn brings up a story about how they were shopping for their grandchildren, her other sister's kids, while they were pregnant, and how her mom embarrassed her. And the store clerk had asked if she was getting something for Bronwyn's daughter too, her granddaughter too. And her mom said no. Bronwyn tries to express to her mom, the hurt, but her mom will not take accountability for anything at all. And at this point, I think Bronwyn's gonna have to accept that her mom is never gonna change, and she's never going to be the mom that Bronwyn wants her to be. And she's gonna have to accept that. And I also agree with her husband. Now I see why her husband didn't want the mom there. I don't want the mom there because she is not good for her mental health. And I hope that they find healing in their situation, but until the mom takes accountability for how she's treating her and how she's belittling her and just even some of the comments she made implying that the daughter Gwen should have been adopted to make it easier for her and her husband versus putting her child first and helping her child out. It was very disturbing to say the least. So in the final scene of this episode, we have Meredith and Angie meeting up for coffee and tea. Meredith asks Angie how she felt about everything, and Angie lets her know, we haven't seen each other since the last time all the girls were together, and some things have changed. She lets her know how Lisa sent her assistant to come over and pick up her son's product and Venmoed her and left some nasty, snarky message to her. And then they, went back and forth, and basically they're in the outs again. And of course, Meredith is Team Lisa. She's just like, oh, okay, girl, I hear you, but she ain't really listening to her. So Andrew's like, I'm just gonna let her know what Lisa's really about. So she tells her, when you and Lisa weren't getting along, Meredith, she encouraged me to research you, to have stuff about you, about shoplifting, lawsuits, all these different things that could hurt you if you tried to come for me. And you could tell Meredith's kind of thinking about it, but she still doesn't really believe her, but her wheels are turning. So she tells Angie, I'm gonna have to, talk to her about this. And Angie tells her, you got my permission, do what you need to do. I stand behind what I said. And, that's that's where the scene ends. I'm curious to see how that conversation goes, and we'll get a sneak peek at the end of the episode. So it looks like it is going to be discussed right away. I have to give it to these ladies. This season 6 has been great. I hope you guys are tuning in. Please, leave a like, a comment down below, and let me know what you guys think about this episode. And you guys have a good rest of the day.